With me in the studio this afternoon, I've got Jack Bedder from the research house Roskills. Jack, really nice to see you. Welcome along.
Thanks for having me.
You've recently published your Global Industry Markets and Outlook report for Cobalt. Of course, the metal's done very nicely over the last 18 months. The price risen dramatically. Talk us through what some of the main reasons behind this.
Yeah, so there's a number of reasons probably underpinning the recent rise in the cobalt price. Fundamentally, it's been a tightness in the metal market. So what we've seen is the shutdown of some key capacity in places like Brazil, China and the Congo, coupled with continued demand for cobalt metal as well, and some institutional stockpiling too as investors seek exposure. On top of that sort of fundamental view, there's been some other things. The age-old issues of cobalt being mainly produced in the Congo continues to be a factor affecting sentiment. And also, of course, we've seen unprecedented growth in demand for cobalt in recent years, which is playing a huge part in market sentiment too.
It's probably worth just taking a step back for a moment. You mentioned the production there. Of course, the vast majority of cobalt's produced as a byproduct.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. So nearly all cobalt's produced as a byproduct. About 75% is a byproduct of copper, and that's mainly in Central Africa, mostly the DRC, of course. About 25% comes as a byproduct of nickel mining, and that's in places like Australia, Madagascar, Philippines, Russia, etc. There's some byproduction from platinum group metal refining in South Africa and a little bit in China as a byproduct of iron oxide copper gold burning. There's really only one primary cobalt operation in the world, and that's in Morocco.
Right. Let's talk a bit more about the demand here. Of course, loads of talk now about batteries, electric vehicles. What's Roskills expecting to happen over the coming decade?
Well, to give you a brief idea of context, we think the market today is about 120,000 tonnes, and we see that growing potentially to over 300,000 tonnes in 10 years' time. Of course, a lot of the hype at the moment is about batteries and cobalt's consumption in batteries. Probably cobalt demand in batteries is about 50% of the market today. So we see that growing at about 14% a year to 2027, by which point the battery market alone will require about 240,000 tonnes of cobalt. So we're talking of a serious increase. But of course, cobalt is consumed in a wide range of other applications. Nickel alloys used in aerospace in particular, tool materials used in industrial application, magnets, pigments, things like that. So all of these markets, they're not going to see the growth rate that the batteries are going to, but they're still going to grow roughly in line with industrial production.
And I suppose the big question then, can supply keep up with this expected demand?
Yes, and that's the challenge facing the cobalt markets at the moment. So when we talk about supply, we really need to break it down into two areas. Firstly, there's the refined supply of cobalt metal and cobalt chemicals that are consumed by the battery industry or the tool materials sector. And then there's the feedstock with which those refined materials are produced, and that is either derived from recycling, which is quite small, or mainly from mining. So on the refined supply of the market, there should be enough particularly chemical capacity over the next 5 years. All of the major Chinese producers, most of the refined production now comes from China, they all have large expansion plans. So there should be enough of the cobalt oxide and sulfate that we require for the next few years. After that, we're going to need more capacity, but given the cobalt price and given the demand outlook, investment in that will be, we think, forthcoming. The real question is there going to be enough feedstock with which to produce this material? And that's probably a bigger question for the market. Roskills' view is that to 2022, 2023, we should see enough feedstock, particularly if major operations come back on stream as they're expected to and ramp up, mainly Glencore in the DRC, and if some major projects enter production as they're expected to. Again, most of those are in the Congo. But after that, there's considerable uncertainty, and we're probably going to need to see new projects, increases from existing miners, perhaps the restart of some operations on care and maintenance, perhaps increases in recycling, all of these things to help supply meet demand.
Well, do you reckon this feedstock, are we going to continue to see most of it coming out of the DRC?
Yes, I think so. Ultimately, the DRC accounts for about 70% of mine production today. It's where all of the world's major reserves are, and it's where all of the major projects are. So we can only see that 70% increasing over the next few years. So
an exciting time for these companies with exposure to cobalt.
Yes, there probably hasn't been a better time to be a cobalt mining project. With the demand outlook as it is, we're going to need to see a lot of new projects enter production over the next few years. We've got a list of about 175 mine projects, so there are a lot of them out there, but importantly, very few are at advanced stages, and very few are of a large scale, so there's some really good opportunities for junior miners at the moment.
Jack, really good to see you. Thank you.
Thanks for having me.